This is Big Brother. This is Big Brother.
Listen, that quote from Angela may have been last week, but I think after the way things just played out, I don't think there have ever been truer words to describe this season. Hey guys, it's coming from my review for this week of Big Brother 26, and holy shit, where do I even begin? Seriously, I thought last week was pretty insane with the way the veto meeting went down and things like that. And this week came in and slapped that one right in the face and said, no, this is the one that is going to fully showcase the true potential of this season and how much it delivers. Look, I've said it before, I've really been loving this season so far, but I truly do think this is the week that shows that Big Brother 26 truly has potential in a way that other seasons simply haven't. If we are able to continue the trajectory, especially of what we saw tonight when I'm filming this video, it's not going to be tonight when this is up, obviously, but you know, in the sense of when I'm uploading this tonight, I think this season truly has the potential to become one of the best Big Brother seasons we have seen in a very long time, and I cannot wait to see the way the rest of it plays out. But of course, we got to talk about, the way everything else went down this week, because especially the episode we were given tonight, I mean, there has never been more of excitement for Big Brother US for me in a very long time, and I think this season, if it continues to go down the trajectory it's on, has the potential to potentially become one of the best we have seen, honestly, in years, and I'm so excited to see the way things play out. But before, of course, we get into the craziness of everything that went down, we do have to talk about this week overall, which I will say is a very interesting week to talk about, because the majority of this week is not that exciting. It seemed like things were heading in a very predictable direction, and then right at the 11th hour, things really heated up, and once it did, it just ended up igniting this fire that has been building up this entire season, and the way it culminates just ends in a way that just has me so hyped to see how the rest of it is going, how the rest of this game is really going to play out. But we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. So of course we're going to start off with Sunday's episode, which I will say right now, for me, out of the episodes we have had in Big Brother 26 so far, discounting the premiere, is easily the weakest episode I think we have had of this season. This isn't necessarily a bad episode. It's certainly better than another episode we're going to be talking about. But I just felt like this episode, they didn't really do the greatest job at capturing everything that was going down, didn't do a great job at showing the true, really just giving us a good narrative of why things are happening in the way that they are, and to me, I just found it to be kind of a lackluster episode with not a ton to talk about. Obviously there's stuff to talk about in the what we didn't see section, but in terms of actual substance, I thought this episode was kind of lacking a bit, but we'll just go ahead and jump into it. So Cedric talks about how he wanted to get blood on his hands. He got a bunch, and while Tucker pulled out the win in the AI arena, he's still very much his primary target moving forward. Tucker is meanwhile, Tucker is so ecstatic that he won the AI arena. He's shocked that no one has voted for Quinn, as he had such a game-changing power, and Tucker comes into this week in a very precarious position where basically everybody wanted him out last week, and this is something that he finds out about very quickly from Cam. Cam kind of lets him know about the fact that people wanted him out and that they were planning on voting him, and you can see how much this lights a fire under Cam. He gives him this heads up, and I think this was both a good move and a bad move for Cam. For one, yes, it clues Tucker in on what's going on, but it's bad because Cam at no point says, I'm not going to be one of those people. Cam doesn't say something like, well, there's a plan to potentially get you out, but I'm not going to be one of them. Instead, he basically warns him that he is going to vote him out if he's on the block, and this gives Tucker the urge to win that much bigger, but it also increases him wanting to target anyone in the game. I think Cam could have used this as an opportunity to, like, you know, kind of see Tucker as an ally, kind of play his own game. But like I've said before, I don't really think Cam knows how to play this game at this point. He's such a non-entity, and it's kind of crazy because, like, he's in the collective, he's in the Pentagon, but he's not really doing much of anything. And I think this was his opportunity to actually try to do something that would benefit his game, and he didn't even try to take it. So, I mean, I'm done just like harping on the fact that Cam isn't playing well, because I don't even think at this point he's trying that much, and it's really disappointing to see. So Tucker then goes to Rubina, and he talks to her about the fact that, like, he won the AI arena and he's really excited about it, but he's also not happy about how open. But there's two things that Tucker immediately took note of, and we talked about one of them, the fact that the house guest reactions were not nearly as genuine this time around when he ended up winning. He took note of that, and now he is just very wary about how to feel about the majority of the house guests, because nobody really seemed happy to see him win. And I feel like this is something that just usually gets overlooked in Big Brother. A lot of people don't take much stock into how they're going to react when somebody wins. But when you have someone like Tucker, who is who is such a perceptive person in pretty much every regard and takes note of the littlest thing, you know, you need to be much more careful about that stuff. And now, because of that, Tucker is pretty much feeling distrust towards everybody, and it really is just kind of their fault at this point. Now, obviously, Tucker didn't help himself with being so fucking chaotic and, you know, crazy last week, but I do think that they could have done a better job at kind of masking the fact that they weren't exactly happy that he won. So he's taking note of that, but he's also not very happy how open Quinn was about targeting him, as he was really trying to rekindle stuff and was hoping that they could try to move forward. But Rubina kind of tells him that he will likely use his power no matter what, and there's not really much they can worry about. And this is really, I think, my biggest issue with this episode, is that a lot of the house guests here make it seem like winning HOH this week is a big deal, when it was pretty obvious that Quinn was going to play as, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in the what we didn't see, but this is really like one of my grievances with the episode. I don't think they really build up the idea that, oh my god, Quinn has this power and we have no idea what he's going to do. They really didn't do a good job of building that up here, and I just felt a little bit underwhelmed with the way they went about that in this week. Now, meanwhile, you have Angela, who at this point is really happy that Tucker won, because she feels like she's on this island and he's really the only person that she can trust right now, which, I mean, I kind of predicted was going to happen. The second that Tucker saved her, I was like, I feel like this is an opportunity for the two of them to link up. And also, Tucker, I think, has just been a really good ally for Angela. You know, he made it clear to her in week 1 that, like, Matt needed to go, and, you know, stuck by her with that. Week 2, he was pushing for Lisa to go. He never once pushed for Angela to go. And then in week 3, he ended up saving her. So I feel like, yeah, these two actually have a pretty good loyalty of sorts, which is kind of crazy considering that these are two of the most unreliable players in the game right now, who are always going to do the most wild shit. I think them having each other's back, though, is the best possible path for both of them to move forward, and hopefully to ensure that they're in this game for at least a while, because they're providing just so much entertainment. I'm sure, you know, everyone's been saying it, but it really is true. They've been providing so much entertainment, and that already is really great to see, but now seeing them linking up and having each other's backs, I mean, truly, I cannot think of a more exciting and just fun outcome than seeing these two potentially work it together. Just the possibilities of them doing so are endless, and I really hope we're able to see more of this duo moving forward. All right, so then we do make our way into the HOH comp, and once again, it was another equitable comp, which is just really great to see. It is a spot the difference comp, which basically each of them, you know, also are calling each other out, and they're going to choose 2 house guests to face off. We see this every single season, but again, I like that they are really just trying to enforce more equitable comps, a lot more, you know, quiz stuff, a lot more strategic stuff. It's just really refreshing to see And I'm just hoping that they don't end up blowing out their budget too early. Like, I worry that because they are doing so many equitable comps, that the end of this season is just going to be like physical, like just constant, like this constant barrage of physical comps. And I really hope that that's not the case, because honestly, the comps have been one of the most consistently good elements of the season, which is just insane to me, because I feel like it's something we are always complaining about, but they continue to deliver. And I feel like this week, it's probably some of the most equitable comps we've seen in Big Brother in a while, and I was just really happy to see that. But something to note about this comp, there were some exciting moments here. Angela keeps choosing Brooklyn twice, which really she does take note of, and then Cam is also picked quite a few times, and we get a bunch of call-outs. There's a bunch of differences that need to be spot, but Angela ends up crushing this comp and ultimately is the new HOH. And again, I mean, we just keep getting the most exciting outcomes this season, and I don't think there was a better outcome here than Angela winning HOH. The fact that she's safe, the fact that she's going to be fine, it's just really great to see. Even though HOH this week, it's not really what it usually is. It's more so an immunity than anything. Angela doesn't really have a lot of power here. There isn't really a lot that she can enforce, because we know that Quinn is going to play his power. But it was still really great to see her win. Seeing Tucker also really excited about it. I just really enjoyed getting to see. And, just considering how much Angela has been delivering, but also just the arc that she's had. Like, think about this. She had this disastrous HOH week 1. Week 2, she's a pawn and ends up surviving unanimously. Only gets 1 vote to her name from Kenny, who's not even in the house anymore, and probably didn't even want to vote her out, just wanted to piss everybody off. And then week 3, she's saved by Tucker, and now week 4 is HOH. This is truly such an unprecedented arc for her, but I really do think Angela is in a position right now to where she may just find herself going pretty far in this game. I don't know how far. I'm not saying she's going to win or anything. I've seen some people suggest it, and look, I would love for that to happen. I would love it, truly. I don't think it's going to. I think that is definitely a bit of a stretch. The idea that Angela can win, I'm not convinced about that yet, but the possibility of her actually going pretty far in this game, I think is a lot more likely than it would have been, if you had talked to me 2 weeks ago, and that's just really great to see here. Now, with that said, despite the fact that Angela is HOH, I don't think she truly does not quite understand what her, what that title really means this week, which, like I said, it's not really that much. She is very much confused about Quinn's power, despite the fact that he told her what it was going to be week 1, and he explained to her how it was going to go, but she is thinking that, like, she's going to make the nominations, and then he gets to, like, change them up, almost like a coup d'etat, where, like, she makes her nominations and then he comes in and changes them however he likes, but that's not at all how it ends up going. And the deepfake in general, similar to America's VO, did not quite play out in the way I expected it to. But again, just really fun to watch. Quinn going to her, he tries to talk to her about, what she has in mind for her nominations, and she makes it pretty clear that she's not really going to give him any sort of hinting at it whatsoever. Instead, she's kind of just trying to get information out of him to see who he wants to save. And, again, just really fun to watch, seeing her trying to, like, enforce her role as the HOH when she really can't do much. It's obviously frustrating, but it's also really fun to watch just because it's Angela, and I like getting to see her do that. But also seeing her continuing to cause chaos, but yet it might not even be her being the one to initiate it. There's this moment with Brooklyn where she goes to her and confronts her about why she is, why she was, like, calling her out twice, and Angela tries to make it clear to her that she just wanted to win the game. This was her competition, but in reality, that's not the case. She very much does see Brooklyn as a threat, and Brooklyn as well is very threatened. So again, while she's not HOH this week, while she is HOH this week, she doesn't do a whole lot to really help herself. I do think this is easily her best week in the sense of what she ends up doing, but the problem is she doesn't really get to do all that much, and so you're not going to hear me discuss Angela a lot in this video, just because like she doesn't really have much of a role this week other than to kind of just sit on the sidelines and watch things play out. She does establish this duo with Tucker and things like that, but other than that, her responsibilities are pretty limited this week, and there isn't really a lot for her to do overall. But even more amusing is that Tucker also is completely unaware of how Quinn's power is going to work. He tries to push to Angela to put Quinn on the block, so then he has to use the power, also putting up maybe Brooklyn and Cedric. And again, this is just very humorous to me, because these are two people who were openly calling Quinn out about his power, yet they seem to have zero clue as to how it actually worked and, what they, how Quinn was actually going to go about it. And I just thought that was really funny to see. So again, I'm already really liking this duo. I want to see them continue to work closer together, and I hope we're able to see that in the coming weeks. But let's go ahead and talk about Quinn here, because he really is the one that has all the power this week, and the way they went about this in particular, I think, was easily the least exciting part of this episode. I don't think they did a very good job in showing, like, this is what I want to do, this is my, plan of action. They make it seem like Quinn is way more unsure of what he wants to do this week, and, we'll talk about that with the what we didn't see, but I just feel like when you have the deep fake out there, especially knowing that Quinn is going to play it, I feel like you just lean more into the idea that, like, there's no suspicion around this anymore, and that Quinn knows that he has to play this no matter what, and I feel like they didn't edit this that well. We do get we do get him saying that, like, he's not happy that Angela won HOH because they had this super public dispute and things like that, and it's gonna now put him in this corner where he's gonna have to use the upgrade, and he doesn't really like the fact that that's happening. So he does make his rounds where, Brooklyn talks to Quinn about how she's very nervous that she's going to be on the block, so she really wants him to try to use his power. And we get a very brief moment then of him kind of letting the Pentagon in on the fact that, like, he makes all the nominations and he meets with everyone. He wants to try to prioritize the visionaries. That's really where his loyalties lie, are with T-Core and Kimo. They are the most important to him. And he pushes to them his initial nominations of Tucker, MJ, and Rubina, which they really do seem to be on board with, and his plan obviously is to try to get Tucker out. He meets with a couple house guests, have these, like, individual, like, one-on-ones with them, meets with Cedric, and Cedric this week is easily one of the most baffling. I mean, look, this is not necessarily, I've said it before, a very strategically sound cast. This is not really a cast that is playing, like, amazing games that are, that we can just laud and constantly just, like, and praise and be so excited for. That's not really what this cast is. It's way more in terms of entertainment value than anything. But what Cedric does this week is a catastrophically bad move in Big Brother. I talked about before how the volunteering for the block is never going to be a good idea. That being said, we really haven't seen it taken that big of an effect on this season. It's kind of just been like something that people have been doing in an effort to win the AI arena. That changes this week very drastically, and, obviously we'll talk about why that is, but Cedric tells Quinn that basically if Quinn is unsure who the third nominee can be, that he himself could be a nominee for him. He wants to try to beat Tucker in either veto or AI arena, or at least it seemed like that was his reasoning. We'll talk about his actual reasoning a little bit later, which is way fucking dumber than what I thought it was here. But here's the thing, and, this is the other reason why volunteering is so bad, is that Cedric presents this in a way where he makes it seem like he's okay with it happening, but then later in a confessional, he talks about how he wasn't so certain that he wanted to go on the block. But the thing is, like, if you present to an HOH that you're okay with volunteering, that is something that they're not going to be able to leave in their head. You are basically giving them a free spot to put you on the block. They don't even have to think about it, and them constantly trying to think of a third nominee, they'll eventually just end up backtracking and putting you up in the first place. And I don't think that's something that any of the house guests have thought about this season. It's, when you give the HOH opportunity, they're not going to let go of it. Most of the time, if you volunteer, they're just going to put you up on the block solely because it's an easy out and they don't even have to think about it. If they want to have a smooth HOH that doesn't make a lot of waves, they will likely just put you up as a pawn in an effort to just not have to, get any more blood on their hands. We've seen Chelsie do it. We saw Cedric do it last week. And now Quinn is highly considering putting Cedric on the block just because he volunteered. The thing is with this, what's even more egregious to me, aside from the fact that I think volunteering for the block is inherently a bad idea, is the fact that Cedric is doing this when his entire reasoning for not wanting to put Quinn on the block last week was because he himself wanted to, make sure that he was safe and that when Quinn pulled out his power that he wouldn't feel compelled to target him. He could target someone else, but he wasn't going to, the move wasn't going to have any blowback on him. That's why he was so insistent upon not putting Quinn on the block. And so he does that and then proceeds to just volunteer anyway. I truly have no words. Like, some of the strategy in this house is just absolutely insane to me and truly not something that I could have ever seen myself doing if I was playing this game. But you know what? Cedric has this idea. He thinks it's going to work out for him, and we'll talk about how it ends up going. But truly, I mean, this is just such a terrible decision all around. We'll talk about how bad of a decision it was a little bit later. But just when I found out that he was going to do this, I was just in such utter shock. I couldn't believe that he was actually going to go through with it and was actually going to volunteer for the block after he had just told Tucker that he didn't want to make an enemy out of Quinn, and now he's basically telling him that he's willing to do it. Again, I don't even know how we got here. This is just absolutely insane to me, but it really does show how one narrative can become so commonplace in the house that now Cedric is just so comfortable going up because, well, he's seen other people do it. And at this point, I don't necessarily blame him because, Tucker volunteered and he was fine. And then, Kenny and, Tucker volunteered last week and he was fine. Cam almost volunteered and he was fine. So, Cedric is convinced that even though he's volunteering, he's going to be fine no matter what. And, well, that might not be the case this time around, that it might not end up happening that way. But we do then get to the nominations, and this, I think, was honestly the most, underwhelming part of the episode, because I was really gearing up to see how this was going to play out. I suspected what was going to happen is that Angela would bring out the nomination block. She would start out with the nomination ceremony. We would get this, effect of, an alarm going off or something, and then Ainsley would come in and tell them that, actually, no, this is your HOH is being hijacked, but instead, that's not really how it ends up happening. Instead, we just cut to this abrupt meeting where we get a deep fake Angela on the screen where she treats it like it's a regular nomination ceremony, and she then makes her nominations. All the while, Angela is, screaming at everyone that, no, it's not me. I didn't do this. It's one, they know you didn't do this. It's obviously Quinn. Two, the bigger issue I have with this is I think it's a really fun idea to use these deepfakes, but the thing is, you knew that this power was going to be a thing, and that, if you weren't sure if it was going to be used or not, I feel like this was the perfect opportunity for them to try to stir up further drama in the house. If they had these deepfakes, available, why not go ahead and just use this deepfake every single week until this power is played to create suspicion that, oh my God, somebody could have used this power. You could out somebody as doing it. You could make someone's HOH seem like it wasn't their HOH when it actually was. I mean, there were so many different ways that they could have gone about this. They could have had the HOH, unknown. They could have, they could have, had the HOH, not able to make a renom and make it seem like the deep fake is doing it this entire time. They could have had these deep fakes throughout the entire season. They could have had Angela, start out like a normal nomination ceremony and then didn't, but they made it the most like boring way possible, because the entire time everybody knows that it's Quinn. There's no suspicion here, and by doing it this way in particular, it makes what should be this really exciting moment on the level of the veto ceremony last week, and instead makes it feel like such an afterthought. It doesn't really feel like they put a lot of effort into constructing how to go about this power, and it really sucks, because I think the deepfake HOH is a great idea for a power. I think it has a lot of potential here, but I think they honestly kind of dropped the ball on this. I really do. I think that what they should have done is either use these deepfakes throughout the entire season, or make this a truly hijacked ceremony where Angela's about to make her nominations and then something happens that stops her from doing it. I just feel like that is so much more interesting than what they end up doing, and instead they opted for the most boring version of it possible. I don't know what goes on with production and things like this. Like, they want these big, exciting, flashy moments, but yet they do whatever they can to make it super boring. I saw people compare this to the triple eviction, and yeah, I think it honestly is pretty similar to that, in the sense where, like, this could have been a really exciting moment, but they really just made it lacked so much tension, so much excitement. It was so obvious what was happening. It didn't help that Quinn literally gives out his reasonings as well afterwards. The whole thing was just really poorly put together, and I was fairly disappointed in this portion of the episode. I do want to quickly talk about, like, Quinn's power overall, because I think on paper, this was a really cool idea. I love the idea that you have this power that you can use at any given point throughout the first 4 weeks. If you feel like you're in danger, or your closest ally is in danger and the wrong person's in power, you can hijack their HOH and they won't even know that you did it. And you can make these nominations and you can really end up fucking them over as a result. I think that's what they were hoping for. Unfortunately, like a lot of the powers in Big Brother, it didn't quite go how I think they were hoping it would. And I think some of that is kind of on them, if you want my honest opinion. Look, I said this on Twitter. I am never a proponent for no power should ever be revealed. Nobody should be telling other people about their power. I think there is a lot of benefits in telling people about your power, and I think people should be allowed to do whatever they want with their power. If you want to not tell anybody, go for it. If you want to tell your entire alliance and, they can figure out a way to coordinate your power to their advantage, go for it. If you want to just literally tell everybody about your power, that's fine. However, I do think there need to be some exceptions when it comes to something like this, and in my opinion, I think this should have been like the coup d'etat, where if Quinn had said anything, he would have lost the power. I think this is just simply way too overpowered of an advantage, and something that is just way too massive for him to be able to tell people about. I think that, America's veto, made sense for MJ to tell people, but this, I don't think Quinn honestly should have been allowed to do. Yes, obviously it's put him in like a really weird, bad position where like he's ratting out things, but I honestly do think this would have been so much more exciting if they had told him, basically told him he was forbidden from telling other people. We could have, we would have been the only ones aware of what he was able to do, and he would have had to, play dumb the entire time. You could have actually used those deep fakes in a way to like make it seem like, the power's out there. They wouldn't even have known the power was out there if they, and then you don't even need to use the deep fakes in that regard. It just, again, it doesn't seem like they handled this very well at all, and I don't even really blame Quinn for this, because there was no rule against him telling everybody. I think he definitely kind of fucked up in that he told Kimo and Angela and didn't tell like anybody else, and it ended up coming to haunt him. And when people asked him about his power, he just like he just kind of like tried to deflect. I think he handled that terribly. But I honestly do think, like, a situation where Quinn doesn't tell anybody about this power is infinitely more exciting than what we ultimately got. So it's just something that I hope maybe if they do this again, they really do end up tweaking. I think Big Brother really is trying to make the invisible HOH a thing, and we've had it 2 seasons in a row now. Last season, Jag told everybody and everyone knew. This season, Quinn told 2 people, and it seemed like that was going to be fine, but then Kimo ended up telling Tucker, and it just kind of spiraled from there. So I really just think moving forward, if they do this again, like any sort of power, whether it's invisible HOH, where they try the deep fake again, I just think whoever is the recipient of it should not be allowed to tell anybody. And I think that's the only way we can prevent this from being an extremely boring outcome in the way that it's been 2 seasons in a row now. But anyway, enough ranting about the power, because there's just a lot of things about it that I just wasn't huge on. But he does make his nominations of Tucker, Cedric, and MJ. He makes it clear, his target is Tucker because of him being called out and things like that. And then Cedric and MJ he sees as like really great competitors, and he's really hoping that they are going to pull through. And that's kind of how we end things off for this episode. Okay, so now that I've gone on about that, let's get into what we really didn't see in this week, which I will say, for the most part, there's not a lot to talk about in this section, because all the things that, similar to last week, that I didn't think they were going to show, they did end up showing. Now, they didn't really show it until Thursday's episode, but they did end up showcasing it later on. So I'm only going to discuss the things that they didn't show at all or that they portrayed incorrectly. The biggest thing here is that they make it seem like in the episode that there was a possibility that Quinn wasn't going to play his power, that he was going to try to leverage him using it against Angela and try to, maybe get her on his side and try to get him, get himself from using it. And it is true that prior to him being outed, he wasn't going to use it. But the second that he already was planning for who he was going to nominate even before the HOH. In fact, Angela was at the top of the pecking order. He was going to do Angela, Tucker, and MJ, and then Angela won HOH. And I just don't understand why you don't frame this around Quinn. Why don't you show a DR of Quinn talking about how I'm using my power this week and I have a plan to get Angela and that's all I need to do, and then Angela wins? I feel like that's so much more of a fun edit than what they ended up doing, where they made it seem like there was this uncertainty of Quinn actually playing it when that just wasn't really the case at all. So I really did take issue with that. The other thing they didn't show is that, and we honestly didn't even get to see this because, of course, the feed's cut and we didn't get to see it because they don't like showing us fights anymore. But before nominations, Tucker and Quinn had like this really big fight, and it really was solidifying like how much they wanted to target each other. And we really didn't get to see any of it aside from like the tail end of them calling each other names and things like that. We didn't really get to see anything else. And I would have really liked to see this play out. I think it would have been really fun to see on the episode. They could have really further ignited that rivalry between these two. I feel like it makes for some really great content, and the fact that they didn't show it, I was a little bit disappointed at, especially because they didn't really show it on the feeds. So that's something I really wish they would have shown. The other big thing here is that in reality, when it comes to Brooklyn and Angela, they showed a little bit of the distrust there, but they didn't really show the real reasoning why Angela doesn't trust Brooklyn, and it's, as usual, because of her being Angela. And what I mean by that is that she was under the assumption the entire week that Brooklyn didn't like her because she wanted to be like the last mom standing, and she's after her because of it. And this isn't something where Angela's gotten any sort of inkling about it. She herself has just, like a lot of things with Angela, has convinced herself that this is the case, and now feels that Brooklyn is gunning for her as a result. And so, again, I think it would have been fun to see this, get a little bit more clarity of what Angela was really trying to do there, and not just make it seem like she was targeting Brooklyn for no reason. But it really does seem like the show wants Brooklyn to be like a villain of sorts, and they're trying to make it seem like Brooklyn is, Parrot was upset at Angela and things like that, when it's true that I don't think Brooklyn should have confronted her in the way that she did. I think that, honestly, she should have just taken Angela at her word and not try to, continue to ask her questions about it. I don't think she handled that correctly. But this isn't necessarily something where Angela did this because she wanted to win. She did it because she thinks Brooklyn is after her, and I think that would have just been really fun to show. By far, though, the biggest thing that frustrated me this entire week, which thankfully gets rectified by the end of the week, T-Core and Kimo are two people that I have really enjoyed watching in this game so far. I think that they are a very likable duo. I want to see them go far. I think they absolutely have this innate ability to, understand each other and, be able to recognize the positioning that they're in. They have this ability to really pull off something big and really stake their claim in the game and end up going far as a result. And I was really pulling for them to do so, but at least for a while this week, they really weren't delivering on that. The entire week, as I talked about last week, Leah has been openly talking shit about Quinn, about how she doesn't want anything to do with him. She finds him, he's making her very uncomfortable, and she really just can't stand him at this point. And T-Core and Kimo are well aware of this the entire week, and they're really dismayed about the fact that Rubina could potentially go on the block. They feel good with her. They want Rubina to go far in this game. They feel like she's a good ally for them. And rather than them try to kind of let Quinn in on the fact that this is not what they want him to do, they instead just kind of talk about the fact that they should, and they don't do anything about it. And it was so frustrating to watch all week long, because they had this information. They could have acted on it in any way they wanted to, even something as simple as, hey, Quinn, I don't think this is a good idea. This is literally their ally. He feels the closest to them. He says this multiple times throughout the week, and they just choose not to. And it's just so annoying to watch, because I like T-Core and Kimo. I want them to go far in this game. I want them to be in the best position possible, but I also want them to use that information to their advantage. Don't just talk about doing it, because after a while of you just consistently going on and on about how you're going to do something, there's only so long before you're able to do it. And it seemed like for a long time they weren't going to do anything about it. More on that later, of course, but it did seem but this is the one thing that, at least to my knowledge, even by the end of the week, Quinn is still completely unaware of, that Leah is not good with him. He does not have the relation with her that he did week one. They aren't on a good path at all, and I really do feel like had they let him know, he would have absolutely changed course and put Leah on the block this week. And there's a good chance that Leah could have honestly gone. Honestly, there really is. Because like I said, Leah doesn't really have anybody in the game right now. I will say I was a little bit more impressed by her this week with how she was turning things around. But I still think that Leah is not in a great spot right now. And I think that T-Core and Kimo, knowing that Rubina was in danger of going on the block, and also knowing that Leah was someone that Quinn trusted when she actively, wanted to do nothing to do with him, I feel like absolutely should have let him in on what happened, and they instead didn't, and it was just really, really frustrating to watch as a result. The only other thing I really do want to discuss here is that, going back to Quinn's power, the one thing they don't show in the episode is that he apparently only had a few hours to make nominations. So nominations were much earlier than usual. They were 12 p.m. their time, and he made the nominations then. And then the entire week, he's playing under this assumption that there are two things that he keeps telling people in regards to why he's making the choices that he does. And the two things that he thinks is happening throughout the week is that, one, that he, even though he has the deepfake HOH, that he still has the ability to vote. And he also talks about how Angela, because she won the HOH, can play in the next HOH. And basically the entire week, he is saying this to people, that, oh, I can be a vote on your side, or Angela can't play next week, so I don't have to worry about her. But he finds out, literally, I think yesterday, that wasn't the case. And this is another thing where it's I don't necessarily blame him. Yes, on one hand, I think it's kind of funny that he thought that this was going to happen and then it didn't. But I think, again, this is this is production needing to step in and tell Quinn that, no, that's not how this is going to work. That's not what you're going to do. That's not how exactly this is going to play out. Pull him aside, let him know. Because the entire week, he is operating under this assumption that this is how things are going to play out. And that's just really not the case. So again, I think just really poorly handled on production's part. I don't know if this is something that they changed last minute because they heard about the backlash online, because all week long, people were saying that, like, this is way too overpowered. There's no reason Quinn should be able to vote. There's also no reason Angela shouldn't be able to play in the next HOH, considering that she doesn't really have a say in anything this week. He also thought that she was going to break the tie, which was not the case at all. So yeah, just a lot of stuff that didn't really make a lot of sense, and I'm glad to see that they did clarify it. I just don't understand why they didn't clarify it immediately, and I feel like if you're going to enforce these rules, you need to stay consistent, and when you don't announce it until literally the day before eviction, it comes across a lot shadier. It makes it seem like you are changing rules on the fly after hearing backlash and things like that, when I feel like a good production team, like, sticks by the rules that they enforced, and I don't think they ended up doing that here, and I just think that was just really weirdly done. Like, again, I'm not accusing them of changing things up on the fly. I'm not saying that's what they did, but it very much looks that way. And the fact that Quinn wasn't even alerted that this is actually how it's going to go down, I think is just really weird and kind of unfair to him. And I don't think it was very well handled at all. So that's something else that just really confused me. And I think I should also just make it known now, the what we didn't see section, it's starting to become a little bit more irrelevant. I'm still obviously going to do it because I think it's very imperative to talk about things that happen in the feeds and give you context if, they portray something wrong or if there's something vital they left out that I felt like they needed to show more of. But, like, 90% of what I've talked about that they haven't shown, they've shown in previous weeks. Like, I literally just talked about Rubina and Tucker in the last video, and they have a whole segment in this episode where they show Rubina and Tucker and the growing, like, feelings between them. So, like, yeah, there's gonna be stuff that I'm talking about here that might end up becoming irrelevant because they're gonna show it later on, but I still enjoy doing this, and I think it's definitely important to do, so I just want to go ahead and address that because I'm sure people are gonna mention it, where it's like, why are you saying they didn't show this when they showed it anyway? At the time I'm filming this video, they didn't, so that's why I'm discussing it now. Maybe they will show these things in a later episode, but for right now, they have not. Alright, so with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and briefly talk about this Tuesday episode, which there's not really much to discuss here. I expected for this episode to not really be much of anything, considering that it's a special episode, and most of the time, special episode is just grounds for we're going to show a bunch of clips of things we already seen. But I will give them this. They did attempt to do something a little bit different here, rather than this be, oh, we have someone come into the house and discuss, like, the previous events. Instead, this episode's presented in almost like a news style, where we have, like, it's almost like a round table style, where we have Taylor, Cody, and Jag sitting around a table discussing all the major events that have happened in the first 3 weeks of the game, and I think that's a really good idea. It's, a really good way to kind of give us perspective on what's going on, maybe see some differing perspectives that we haven't heard before, get us to, kind of get a sense of, like, what's been going on in the game and things like that. The whole point of this episode, we actually find out through Taylor, actually, because she was tweeted about it and she said that this was the point of it, is that they did this under the assumption that the people that were watching had been watching the Olympics and weren't really paying attention to Big Brother, and if they weren't, this was like a way to catch them up, and I think that's all really good. I just think the way they did it wasn't necessarily the most ideal way to get them caught up, because while we're hearing Taylor, Cody, and Jag, like, discuss their opinions, they're constantly interrupted by these clips of things that we've seen. A lot of those clips are taken out of context. There's a lot of things missing. Like, we hear about the Angela and Matt fight, but we don't see her staying up all night to, like, concoct the speech. So while, yes, we love seeing the fight between the two of them, we don't get to see all the details that happened in between that. While we get to see Tucker volunteer for the block and things like that, we don't get to see the moment of Chelsie kind of struggling as to whether or not she actually wanted to do it. When it came down to the veto ceremony, we don't get to see MJ, calling out Cedric and things like that. So it just seemed like, I think if they're going to do this, in my opinion, I don't think this should have been an episode. I think you should do this more as like maybe a weekly YouTube series. Like, hey, here's Taylor, Cody, and Jag to discuss the events that went down throughout the week. Maybe have them talk about things we saw in the episode, but also things that happen on the feeds. Kind of what I'm doing in this video, giving you a sense of things that maybe we didn't see and give their opinions on it. I think that's all I think that could be a very valuable thing to do, especially for casuals who don't watch and don't have time to watch. I think it's a good way to kind of clue them in on what's going on. I just don't think it needs to be an episode, because as an episode of television, it's incredibly choppy. We don't really... Cody and Jag especially, it just seemed like they didn't really know what to talk about. Taylor was doing a great job because she has really great insight, but she also now has the experience. She does exit interviews with all the house guests on like ET and things like that. But Cody and Jag especially seemed really lost. It didn't really seem to have the proper insight. I think that's because Jag, the game that he played, it's understandable why he is, kind of seeing the game in that way. Cody has a very boring view of Big Brother, and I've never really, really enjoyed his opinions all that much and hearing his takes on things. But again, I think this should have either just been Taylor, or they should have just done this as like a weekly YouTube series. I don't think this works as an episode because it just kind of falls apart and really just ends up being a bona fide clip show by the end of it. Even though they do show things that are important, the commentary and the insight just feels so surface level. It just didn't really feel like this episode was really all that worth it. They do show a moment of T-Core and Kimo, which I liked because we didn't see that in the episode, and I feel like that was definitely important to see. But like aside from that, they didn't really show much of anything. And then the other issue with this episode for me is that they kind of fooled us into what it was going to be. They said, well, Taylor, Cody, and Jag will be on to discuss, everything, but then Ainsley's going to reveal the next big twist, and she kind of doesn't. She discussed the name of the twist, the AI instigator, and that it involves America voting, but other than that, she doesn't say a single thing about it, and I just found that to be so incredibly frustrating, because why are you telling us to get excited for this twist and then not even reveal what it's going to be? Like, you could have just taken 30 seconds to tell us what this twist was going to be, have it revealed then, and I assume that this was because they were going to reveal it was a big enough twist that they were going to reveal to the house guests on Thursday what it was. But the way they went about it, I don't understand why they couldn't just reveal it here. Like, just tell us what it was going to be, have it's time for America's vote thing at the end of this episode. It just didn't really make sense to me why they decided to tell us the title and then say, oh, well, you gotta wait till Thursday to hear the rest of it. Especially in hindsight, now knowing what this twist is, I really don't understand why they went about the way they did. So yeah, just a really weird episode overall. I don't really have a ton to say about it. Just very much a throwaway. I think that there was definitely, I'm not gonna say it was a pointless episode, because there absolutely was a point. They, like I said, they wanted to catch people up on the show for those that were maybe watching the Olympics or didn't really have the time. I think that's all really great. I just think the way they went about it structure-wise just didn't really work as a whole. Okay, so now that we got that episode out of the way, which, like I said, not much to talk about in terms of substance, let's get back on track here and actually talk about the exciting stuff about this week going into Wednesday's episode, which this is where things really got great. I think that both this and especially Thursday's episode were generally really great. I thought it was really well put together. They included some things that I talked about before in what we did in C's. I think last week, in fact, I talked about some of the things they have in this episode, which I wasn't expecting them to do, so I think that was kind of cool. And immediately, one of those things they end up showing that I talked about last week is the collective. I discussed this before, how Joseph has really been trying to make an effort to restart it. He has this meeting with them that really only he is into. Cedric is pretty confident, though, that they're all going to make it to jury. We get a little bit more insight on how everybody feels about it. Cedric is very confident that they can all make it to jury. Quinn has zero intention of riding things out with them, but he needs numbers to take out Tucker. Brooklyn is still very much on the train of the Pentagon. The only thing I didn't like about this is that they made it seem like Joseph was the one that brought Brooklyn into it when he literally was mad at Chelsie last week that Brooklyn was in the alliance without his approval. So it's not the most accurate retelling, but I was glad that they finally showed it because I think it was very much needed to tell the story that they wanted to tell. It's also the most that Joseph has gotten in the show so far. We also see a little bit of his final two he has with Tucker. As we know, one of Joseph's strategies coming into Big Brother is that he wanted to find someone that's stereotypically a bro that is probably going to win a lot of comps that he can kind of use to his advantage in any way that he wants to and get really close with them and kind of use them as a way to find out more information. They can win comps on his side, he's on their side, and then turn on them when he wants to. And he tried to do it with Matt, but obviously that didn't work. But it seems like he's now pivoted towards Tucker, and I think this is going to work out much better for him because, look, Tucker's in a position where a lot of people want him out. Most of the house, in fact, wants him out, but he is on a winning streak right now. And so I think that as long as Tucker continues to win comps and continues to, become this target, I think this is honestly going to work really well for Joseph. They make this final two called the Critics. Joseph says that he's not necessarily going to stick his neck out for Tucker, but if it comes down to it, if he keeps winning comps, he may just start to do so. So again, I like the insight we got here. I think this was very much needed for, any casual viewers to kind of catch us up on what's going on, get us more of an insight into Joseph's game, but also get us to understand, the importance of what it really does end up going down this week. So before veto picks happen, Quinn does talk to Kimo and Cedric. He really wants to try to get Tucker out this week, but he also reminds them that he can't play in the veto, which this I like. I like that they did not allow him to play in the veto because obviously he's the deepfake. It wouldn't make sense for him to do so, but Angela can, and he's hoping that his name is going to get pulled. And then Brooklyn kind of discusses this plan with him about potentially as a way to weaken Tucker to put Rubina on the block. Even if Tucker does win the veto, Rubina should go up as a way, so one of them will end up going. And I think this was a good plan, but I think this was something that Brooklyn should have told Quinn when he made nominations. I think that, if you really wanted to get Rubina out, which isn't a bad idea, of course, I think Rubina is a number for Tucker. The two of them are getting fairly close. She considers him a close ally. There's this growing interest between them. We don't know where it's going to lead, obviously. They don't want it to be a showmance. They want it to be more of just a flirtmance, but still, they are a pretty close duo. I do think it is a good idea for Brooklyn to propose this, but I think she should have done this before he made nominations, because right now, there's so much that's up in the air. It's such a results oriented thing where it's if Tucker wins the veto, then what do you do in that scenario? If Rubina is somehow picked and she wins and she saves Tucker, then what are we going to do? So again, I think this was good. This was a good idea that Brooklyn had. I just think that she pitched it at exactly the wrong time, but I do think overall she was definitely onto something here. But we then get to the veto picks, and for the, I don't know how many weeks in a row now, Joseph and Brooklyn once again are drawn to play. This is insane to me. It's last season we had Suri never being picked for the veto. This season, Joseph and Brooklyn can't stop being picked for the veto. Now, granted, Joseph was Tucker's choice and Brooklyn was Cedric's choice, so they're just having really good luck, but this is still insane to me that they just continually end up getting picked for veto. I wonder if the streak is going to end, because for the past 3 weeks now, one of them has competed in veto at least every single time, and I think it's really funny the way this has continued to play out even into this week. And we then get to the veto comp, and again, I have to praise the production team here, because I think that this comp in general is one of the best ideas they have had for a comp in quite a bit. It's not quite on the level of the Reindeer Games one they had last season. I think that is top tier and something that they definitely need to try to implement. I'd love to see them do something like that in this season. I don't really know how they would go about that, but I think it'd be really cool, especially with this cast. I would love to see them do that. But basically it's like a Dance Dance Revolution type setup. They have to try to step on these green tiles. If they step on green, they advance to the next stage, but if they step on red, they have to start all over again. And again, I like that there's a lot of strategy into this, but also it's one of the, there's this combination that you have to try to remember. And if you, forget about it, you're going to end up, stepping on red tiles. But it also is this head-to-head of sorts where you have to try to, get there before your partner does. I think before your opponent does. I think this was just overall a really fun comp to watch. And it wasn't like last week where it was a really equitable comp, but it wasn't fun to watch. This one was both equitable and fun to watch, and I think that they did a really good job with constructing this. But ultimately, we have a bunch of different matchups here. It does come down to Cedric and Tucker, which I thought was pretty fitting, considering that Tucker told Cedric he was going to face him off in the AI arena. Now, this wasn't quite the AI arena, but I like getting to see the face-off between them, and Tucker once again clenches the win. He earns a second veto, which is much to the chagrin of Quinn and the collective and anyone else that is targeting Tucker. He has won the veto here. But of course, the big question is, what is he going to do with it? Is he actually going to, and this is insane to think about, is he going to use the veto on himself? Because now Tucker is in this position where, because he did something crazy last week, people are kind of under the assumption that maybe he'll just do it again. And I was even under the assumption that maybe he'd do it again. He talks to MJ. It makes it seem like he's maybe going to just not use the veto at all because he wants to try to beat her or Cedric in the AI arena. Which is like crazy to think about. It seemed like he was going to do it, but he does talk to Angela, and she is outraged at the thought of him even thinking about not using it. She says that this is not a good time to do it. He needs to use it. He needs to do it for his game, and I like that she says like he needs to do it for his game and not for America. And so he's really unsure what he's going to do here. He has this conversation with Quinn, where he kind of alludes to the fact that he's not going to use it on himself, and Quinn is very much now under the assumption that he's just not going to use it on himself and that they're probably going to be fine. Ultimately, though, we do get to the veto meeting, and Tucker does use the veto on himself. I know, this is what we've come to. This gameplay this season is so strange that we're literally talking about how shocked we are that somebody used the veto on themselves and not on somebody else, or didn't use it at all. Like, that's insane to me that that's even something we're thinking about. But honestly, I think we just really need to feel blessed about the fact that we have such a chaotic player like Tucker on our screen, and he's continuing to just deliver the goods in terms of craziness and just having us all just so on edge of what he's going to do every single week. But he does use the veto on himself, and then as a result, Angela, of course, actually Quinn, then renoms Rubina in his place, and this is kind of like what we expected him to do, but that's kind of where we leave things off in this episode. Okay, so I know you guys are really excited for me to talk about Thursday's episode, and trust me, we're getting there, but before we do, there are a couple things that we need to discuss that we didn't see in this episode that I think are worth talking about. And it's not even like stuff we didn't see, it's just stuff that I think was portrayed incorrectly. The biggest one for me here is the way they portray Quinn renomming Rubina. There was no question whatsoever. He was always going to renom her. He came into the week having like the main target of Tucker. His backup was going to be MJ, and then if it wasn't MJ, it was going to be Rubina. So he always had plans to put her up. He saw her as sort of this accessory of sorts to Tucker, and he needed to put her up as a result. He tried to talk to her about it, and she didn't really do much to try to save herself either. Admittedly, she fought definitely, but there wasn't really a lot that she did. But there also wasn't a lot that she could do because he kind of just told her that, like, you're going to be the pawn. And so I just was a little bit annoyed with how they portrayed that particular situation because it wasn't nearly as up in the air as the episode made it seem. All right, so now we just have to get into Thursday's episode, and look, I'll just say right now, by no exaggeration, Thursday's episode is absolutely a top all-time episode of Big Brother. Like, truly everything you want in a Big Brother episode is here. A crazy blind side, a bunch of different shifts within the game, a bunch of crazy strategy going on, iconic moments, the most insane outcomes possible, split votes. I mean, everything that we want to see on an eviction episode is in this episode, and truly, I was just so blown away by how things ended up playing out here because, look, there were discussions throughout the week of this possible flip of sorts. I talked about T-Core and Kimo and how they really didn't want Rubina to go, but considering just how passive they were throughout the entire week, I really didn't think anything was going to come of it. But damn was I wrong, because immediately in this episode, we see a much bigger emphasis on T-Core and Kimo. I would go as far as to say Kimo especially is the star of this episode. Everything is pretty much framed through him. He's the one talking about, flipping the vote and kind of the positioning that him and T-Core are in. And I thought overall they did a really great job of catching us up on all the events that had happened. And I was prepared to come on here and talk about how, they're not gonna show all the stuff that T-Core and Kimo were talking about doing because that just isn't interesting to show, but they actually did it in this episode. So I didn't even really need to talk about it in what we didn't see, because we did end up seeing it in this episode, where basically Kimo is talking to both of the visionaries about the collective and how, while he feels good about it, he feels like he's on the bottom. And Quinn is kind of agreeing that there's this hierarchy of sorts, and Kimo talks about the Pentagon and how well insulated they are, and we find out that Quinn has actually told T-Core and Kimo about the Pentagon, and ever since then, they really don't know how to feel about the collective, because they feel like there's this hierarchy, there's this 5-person alliance, and they're not in it. And Kimo is feeling really uneasy about it. He's really happy that Quinn told him about the Pentagon, but it doesn't really make him feel any better about it. So we see Tucker and Rubina are trying to talk with the visionaries because they know that they need their votes. Rubina especially is like really going to work here, and they're trying to get her to prepare for the AI arena because she's not really sure how she's going to do in the comp. And things really start to be set into motion once Rubina ends up in this alliance known as 5 Points, which consists of her, Tucker, T-Core, Kimo, and Brooklyn. And Kimo is feeling way more secure in this because it includes all the people he trusts, whereas the collective, it feels like he was just included a little bit too late. And this makes sense. Kimo hasn't really put a lot of effort into the collective. He's slept through various meetings. He really doesn't have as much of a say in it, so it makes sense why he is feeling so distanced from that alliance. And eventually, the two of them do end up kind of talking about what to do this week, and we see that T-Core is starting to feel very doubtful about Quinn, feeling like he's going to flip on her once he has to, and so they really want to make sure that they solidify something. They know that Rubina is good for their game, but Cedric also is in the collective, and they start to kind of hint at the possibility of potentially flipping the vote onto Cedric. They know that if it's MJ and Rubina or MJ and Cedric, MJ is going to go. But it's the Rubina and Cedric of it all, that's the one that really has everyone kind of up in arms. And this is what is so great about the AI arena, is that there's so much uncertainty coming into this vote. We literally didn't know who was going to end up leaving until it came down to the comp. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I mean, this is why I've enjoyed this twist as much as I have, because these conversations do not end up happening if there are just 2 nominees on the block and there is no AI arena. Because of the fact that there is an AI arena, they're able to have these conversations, and it makes for a far more interesting episode of television as a result. So he eventually ends up having this conversation with Brooklyn, who she is very much just like on team collective, team Pentagon. She is convinced that everyone is just going to vote in in unison to keep Cedric. That's nothing that she has to worry about, and that they either need to leave Tucker out of the vote or Tucker's just going to vote unanimously to take Rubina out. And, she's so confident that things are going to go her way, and this really gets Kimo to think that we really need to do something to try to keep Rubina safe, and he doesn't think the collective is going to be on board with it. So, obviously because Cedric's included, but also because of the Pentagon, he knows that they need 5 votes. They try to pull in Leah and MJ, and Leah, we see actually strategize, which I like seeing because, like I've said before, Leah has potential. When Leah is strategizing, I think she actually is showing promise, and we see that here with her. She talks to T-Core about where the votes are going and how she's down to keep Rubina. She doesn't really feel good with, while she likes Cedric, she feels like it's good to keep Rubina in because it's good for her and Tucker to be targets within the game. And then MJ also is willing to do it. And at this point, why wouldn't she be? She doesn't have ties to anybody. She wants Cedric out. She's willing to work with them regardless. And I really like seeing this work from Leah and MJ. I've been severely disappointed in both of them. And I really like seeing them actually put effort in and be willing to vote this way and actually maybe take a little bit more initiative in the game than we've been seeing. But of course, then the question really arises of, are they actually going to pull this off? Kimo is very much down to do this, but T-Core is very hesitant. She doesn't know if it's the right time. She really feels like Cedric is the person she trusts the most outside of the Visionaries, but she does really want to keep Rubina around, so there's a lot of hesitancy on her part. But again, I was really pleased with how they ended up covering this, because we had this week of just these two sitting around and constantly talking about things that they wanted to do but not doing anything about it, and to see them finally, it seems, start to take action was just really satisfying, because like I said, I like the duo of T-Core and Kimo, but I can't really root for them when they're not doing anything, when they're just talking about doing things. To see them actually act on it, this is what I wanted to see all week, and I was really excited to see them seemingly finally start to do something, and I was really hoping this flip was going to happen as a result, but especially seeing how overly confident Brooklyn and Chelsie were throughout the week, so sure that the numbers were just going to go in their favor no matter what, and not really trying to do much to recruit someone like an MJ, recruit someone like a Leah, and try to get them on their side. Again, just kind of assume that everyone's going to vote the way they think they are. I really just wanted to see this vote happen, and, just the possibility of it just seems so exciting, and, getting to see this footage, it really did make it seem like this was actually going to go down. Now, before we get to the AI arena, there is one last segment to talk about, and that is with Angela, which I wasn't sure if they were going to show this on this episode. I really didn't know if they were going to be able to fit it in, but they did. So as we know, the 5-point alliance was formed, and Angela's kind of at this point where, because she's close to Tucker, she kind of wants to be included in everything, and Angela continues to just do some wildly unorthodox shit in this game that I don't think we've ever seen anybody do, but I'm so happy that she did, because it's such an entertaining moment. While 5 Points is discussing their alliance, she's literally crouching out behind the door, listening in, and she ends up going to them and basically asks to be added to their alliance and says that she's fine even if she's at the bottom. Everyone's going silent, but Tucker basically just says that she's in, because what else is he gonna say at that point? Again, just such a fun moment. I continue to love just how unpredictable and wild Angela really is. She's always doing the thing that you wouldn't expect anybody else to do in her position, but that's why she's so much fun to watch. She's so uniquely herself, but honestly, it's kind of working out for her. I think because things are getting so much more chaotic, she honestly becomes a lot less bigger of a target, and if she actually ends up being included in this alliance, I mean, this could actually pay off in dividends for her. Her starting off rejecting an alliance and now actually wanting to turn, and now actually maybe having some sort of influence would be really great. I don't know if this is going to go anywhere, but this was just a really great segment from Angela. I was really happy they included it. I thought this was going to be something I would have to discuss and what we didn't see, but I was happy to see they included in the episode, and I thought it was just, in an episode that was very intense, this was a really funny moment to watch. But then it all comes down to the AI arena, and again, this is why I enjoy this twist as much as I do, because for the first time all season, it really did matter who ended up winning. It kind of did last week, where if Tucker didn't win, he probably was going to go. But especially this week, it really mattered who ended up winning, because I wanted to see Cedric and Rubina on the block. I wanted to see that outcome just because they had talked about it so much as to what they would do in that situation, that I really just wanted to see it play out. But I didn't actually know if it was going to, because there were so many talks of just MJ going and people not including her in things because they assumed that she was going to be evicted, that I wasn't really sure how this was going to go. But then we get down to what the actual comp was, where basically they have to roll 5 spears up a ramp. Once all 5 been uploaded, they're going to press a green button, and then they have to knock them down the ramp once more. And then once they've uploaded and downloaded all 5, the person who does the fastest is going to win the AI arena. And this was actually a really close comp. I really didn't know how it was going to go. It seemed like MJ had it for a bit, and then it seemed like Rubina was starting to pick up steam. Cedric was not doing well in this at all. But Rubina seemed like she was going to pick up steam. And right when I thought Rubina was about to win, MJ rings in, and MJ ends up winning the comp and is now off the block. And honestly, look, I have not been a big fan of MJ. I don't really find her to be a very likable personality. I haven't really enjoyed seeing the way she's played this game. But, I mean, just the fact that she won this, knowing that she was probably going to be evicted, and it was going to be the most predictable outcome, whereas Rubina and Cedric, it was so much more up in the air. I was just so excited to see this is how it was going to go down. It really made me think the possibility that this flip might actually happen, and we might get to see it play out, and this could be a really exciting night of television. I think it really just kicked off what ended up being such a shocking and just eventful episode that we ended up getting, and this was just the perfect way to start all that up. So we get to the part where Julie announces that MJ has won, and for once, they actually end up taking that 90 seconds. After Julie constantly going on and on for weeks about how she wanted them to strategize, I think she finally figured out how to do it, because instead of doing it when they come back into the house, she told MJ, Cedric, and Rubina to strategize when they came back in, and that's exactly what ended up happening, and this was just great. I mean, I think this is, like, when they envision the AI arena, I think this is exactly what they wanted to see, where basically every single week it's like a double eviction, where you're pulling people into rooms and you're discussing what to do, and that chaoticness, that, sense of excitement, that tenseness that we see in double eviction episodes, we saw in this episode, and it was even more exciting to watch because they weren't even given that much time to talk about it. And I think the best part of it all the strategizing we were seeing was essentially kind of pointless. Like, we saw Brooklyn go to Rubina, but she wasn't really strategizing. She was just telling her that she was going to be voted out and that she enjoyed playing the game with her, assuming that she was about to be voted out Yunan. Meanwhile, you have Cedric, who's pulling in like T-Core and Kimo and Angela and Tucker, people who are not at all going to vote for him, but hoping he can get them, having this conversation with Tucker that they should let bygones be bygones after what happened last week. I mean, just so many great moments here. And again, I think we can, after this week, officially say that the AI arena is like by far the best twist we have had in BBUS in years. I think they finally have figured out. It took a little bit, I think, but I think they finally figured out what was working about this twist and how they can perfect it to the best of their abilities. And I think this is exactly how you do it. You just have it happen organically. And I said this, when Julie was trying to force them to do strategy, it's something that needs to happen organically, and it ended up happening here. There was so much up in the air when it came to this particular outcome of who was going to end up going. There was some strategy that needed to happen. There was some talk. There were some votes they needed to secure to make sure everyone was on the same page. And it was just really great to see them finally take advantage, but also get to hear those conversations that were happening. It honestly just makes me so excited that they were finally able to get this right after a couple weeks of them having this awkward moment. I think we can definitively say that the AI Arena twist has been such a big success, and I'm honestly going to be sad when it goes, because I think when we have a night like this, where this was something that was very unprecedented for a lot of people and something that they were just kind of thinking, well, what if? And it suddenly turned to a possibility. I mean, that's what we love seeing in Big Brother, when you have these ideas that seem so wild, seem so, just out of reach, and seem like something that you would like to happen wishfully, but you don't know if they're actually going to come to fruition. To see that actually get to take place here was just so exciting to watch, and it's even better when it ends up delivering in the way it did here, and that it very much did. So again, just major kudos to the Big Brother production team on coming up with the AI Arena. I think it's the best twist they've come up with in years, and I'm honestly going to be really sad when it goes away, because I think it has honestly improved the game significantly. But then it comes down to the pitches from Rubina and Cedric, and to both of their credit, I mean, they were both fighting so hard in this moment. Rubina is pretty much convinced that she's gonna go, and so she's making this pitch saying that, like, it's been great being here and things like that, whereas Cedric is, you can tell he's honestly not so sure, and you kind of feel bad for him, because I think he was so convinced that he was going to win a comp and then didn't, and that's why he put himself on the block. But then I also don't, because he volunteered to go on the block and really has nobody to blame for himself by that. But I did feel for him in the sense where, like, he was fighting so hard here, and he talks about, like, how much he's learned from all of them, being so young, and that he hopes it's not his time to end it. Rubina also talks about, like, how much she's enjoyed the season. It's just, again, we don't normally get to see two nominees that are so uncertain of what their fate is going to be, but it just makes for such a more exciting it just makes for such a more exciting eviction when it ends up happening. How often do we see a situation where both nominees are completely in the dark of what's about to happen, and we actually get to see it take place in the way it did? I mean, that's what makes this such a great episode, is that everything we wanted to happen basically does happen here, where we then get to the vote. We find out Angela and Quinn are not allowed to vote, which absolutely is what they should be doing. I think it was ridiculous that they ever told Quinn that he could vote. That does not make sense at all. If he's the deep fake, that doesn't really work out in any sense of the imagination, considering it's supposed to be anonymous. Obviously it's not anymore because everyone knows about it, but, like, it was supposed to be. It makes sense that he couldn't vote, and I like that they finally put that into place. But we get down to the votes, and look, I was still hoping that this flip was going to happen, but I also have trained myself when it comes to Big Brother, where it's like, okay, let's not get our hopes up here. There are episodes that have told us that a flip could happen, and then it doesn't happen, and we get all excited, and then it doesn't end up happening here. But the second they went to MJ, and MJ said Cedric, I was like, oh, it's on. It is fucking on, and my God, was it ever, because not only does this vote end up happening, it ends up being a 6-3 vote where Brooklyn, Chelsie, and Cam all end up voting for Rubina, and Cedric is then blindsided. And my God, what an incredible moment this really was. And, to Cedric's credit, he took it like a champ. He really did. Like, he left the house as gracefully as I think you really could, but seeing all these different house guests vote Cedric out with tears in their eyes, mind you, like Kimo and Joseph and, MJ and Leah, they were all, like, really saddened to vote Cedric out, but still go through with it and not let their emotions get in the way and actually go through with doing it, coupled with seeing Brooklyn so shocked, but also so outraged and mad at everyone that ended up voting that way. I mean, this was just everything we want to see in an eviction like this. Like, I honestly couldn't have asked for anything better. I think the obvious comparison here is Judd from Big Brother 15, but with Judd, everyone knew that Judd was going to be voted out except for Judd. This was even better, to where not only Cedric was blindsided, but also Rubina was blindsided, like, so excited that she ended up, surviving, and was like, thanking everybody for it. But then also having Brooklyn and Chelsie so in the dark of what was going on, when they were so convinced that the vote was going to go their way, and then having this look of just anger on their face. I mean, it was just everything that we wanted to see, and I really couldn't have asked for a better outcome, even if you tried. This was just so great to watch. So we do get to Cedric's exit interview, and I really like this interview a lot. He talks about how, he really felt he had Brooklyn's support, but also was unsure if it was Cam or Chelsie. Julie confirms to him that it was, and he also mentions that, like, he knew that T-Core and Kimo weren't going to vote for him because they had such a close relationship with Rubina, so he kind of saw it coming in that regard. I don't think he expected for Leah and MJ to vote the way they did, though. He was also pretty sure, like, how it was going to go on their regard, though, and I like that Julie asked him, like, why he volunteered and risked his game, and he talks about that he felt that it was all about trusting individuals, and that he knew going in that T-Core and Kimo were iffy, and that he apparently, and that all is fine. The part that really annoys me here, and makes it even worse that Cedric volunteered to go on the block, is that all this time, I thought that Cedric volunteered because he just really wanted to be Tucker in the AI arena, or like the veto, and like, have another comp win on his resume. I thought that's what he wanted to do. Turns out that's actually not why he volunteered. He volunteered because he was sure that T-Core and Kimo didn't have his best interest, and he wanted to see if they could prove himself, and that if they were good then, that they would be good forever. And I can't even begin to tell you how stupid of a move that really is. Like, if you want to ensure that there are house guests that have your back, you do that with a vote. You do that when you're in power. You do that when they're in power and don't put you on the block. You don't go on the block hoping to have their votes, but also are unsure if they're going to vote your way. That's just such an ass backwards strategy, and I can't even begin to I don't even think I need to even go on more about why that is such a bad idea. But yeah, I mean, I think that I can definitively say after this especially, that Cedric going on the block and volunteering is like top 5 worst moves in Big Brother history. Like, there's no question about it whatsoever. He honestly would have been fine. I think when it comes to the collective, he was probably the one that was like in the least amount of danger. He handled things really well last week when it came to Tucker. Aside from him, nobody was really coming for him. Quinn didn't even want to put him on the block. This was all Cedric's suggestion, and he goes on the block wanting to win a comp, but now also wanted to gain votes from T-Core and Kimo, so he was kind of fine with sitting up there regardless, and was hoping that they were going to vote to keep him. And doing so knowing that, like, he could still go, and feeling okay with it because then he knew that he had their trust. I mean, just all around terrible. And I'm so shocked that he actually went through with it. I mean, look, I thought he would win a comp at some point. Yes, I thought maybe he'd win the veto, maybe he'd win the AI arena, but the fact that he didn't, it just makes it that much more baffling to me. Like, again, if you were uncertain, there were other ways for them to prove their loyalty to you than just this, and if you wanted to beat Tucker, there were other ways to do that as well. This was certainly not the way to go about it, and on the one hand, like I said, I feel for Cedric because I really like him. I thought he was a very likable personality. I thought that he just seems like a very, like, down-to-earth and very nice guy. I like his exit interview with Julie. You know, he talks about how he made all these, like, strong connections and things like that. But I just think, like, strategy-wise, again, like a lot of people in this cast, he's really just not there. And I don't think any of what he's saying here really makes any sense whatsoever. So while it sucks to see Cedric go, he's probably the person in the collective I wanted to see go the least, because I really have been enjoying him on this show. Just seeing the chaos that it created, but also the way that it completely changes the perception of the game in terms of the collective and kind of gets them to reframe things, but also kind of gets Cedric to realize just how stupid of a move it was. All around, it's just such a great outcome, and as much as it sucks to see Cedric go, I'm just really happy this ended up happening so we could produce the great TV we ended up getting here. For the horrible audio quality in this part of the video, but I just watched Cedric's extended interview, and yeah, I mean, I feel like I still have, like, the same things to say, but he does mention in the video that, like, he wishes he got rid of Quinn on his HOH, and ultimately, yeah, I think he honestly maybe should have taken that shot, because I think in hindsight, like, things would have gone much differently for him. Obviously, Quinn wasn't intentionally trying to get him out, but I do think maybe had he had taken that shot, I don't know if what happened this week would have happened to him. Obviously, T-Core and Kimo already knew about the Pentagon regardless, so there wasn't really much he could do there. And then Joseph, like, straight up lying as well. I was not expecting that to happen. That kind of makes me worried that Joseph is not going to have the greatest jury management if he gets there, but, you know, we'll discuss that when it is. Either way, I just think Cedric is a really great guy, and it sucks to see him go. I still take a lot of issue with him deciding to volunteer for the block, and also why he decided to volunteer for the block. I still think that's all really ridiculous, but it does not change the fact that, like, as a person, I really enjoyed watching him this season. I think he was just really nice and just a really refreshing to watch. He was just so authentically himself, and you could see how much everybody loved him in the game, and I think that was something that definitely translated very well in those goodbye messages. Even having, like, a pretty good rapport with Julie and, like, hinting that, like, he'd come back, which honestly, like, I would love to see Cedric come back in, like, a couple years if he's, like, a little bit older and kind of, like, learned more about the game. I feel like coming in as, like, the youngest, it's always gonna be not necessarily a disadvantage, but I think that it definitely made it so, like, he wasn't thinking as much about certain decisions, and I think maybe coming back he'll have a little bit more knowledge. So I could definitely see them bring him back if they ever did, like, a pre-jury season or something, which I don't think they'd ever do. I could definitely see Cedric coming back in that regard. So overall, I mean, I don't usually watch a lot of the extended interviews, but this one was on YouTube and not on Instagram, so I figured I'd actually go ahead and watch it, and honestly, I'm happy I did, because I think it just heightened my appreciation for Cedric overall, and I just really liked what we got to see here. Sucks to see him go, but again, it makes for some really exciting television. So I hate that it was Cedric that ended up having to go, but I'm just really I'm happy the outcome ended up happening. It just sucks that Cedric had to be the one. And then even towards the end of this episode, I mean, we get some really great moments where T-Core and Kimo are celebrating their victory. T-Core talks about how they did that, and, you know, Kimo's really proud. Brooklyn, Cam, and Chelsie are just so utterly puzzled at what's going on. They're, like, shell-shocked. They don't know what to do. Again, just such great stuff overall. Again, apologies for the really bad audio here, but this tends to happen in Big Brother a lot, where, like, you have an alliance that's, like, doing really well, and then the power just kind of goes to their head. I saw somebody on Twitter, like, try to compare, like, Brooklyn and Chelsie to, like, Cirie and Izzy last season, and I don't think it's an apt comparison at all, because Cirie and Izzy did everything they could to make sure that they were in the center of things. They would check in with people, they would have one-on-ones with people, they would try to pull people into things, whereas Brooklyn and Chelsie really have not done that, especially this week. They completely discounted MJ, they completely discounted Leah, and what happened? They end up going rogue, and they voted the other way, and them now being in the position they have is entirely their own fault. Brooklyn especially was so convinced that everyone was going to vote the way that she thought they were going to. She didn't think about the possibility that maybe they won't, and now she's going to pay the price for that. And, you know, I like Brooklyn. I've enjoyed her in the game so far, but the way she played this week was honestly really annoying, and I'm glad to see that she's going to end up having to pay for it. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how these two try to regain their footing, but also how they start to accept the fact that they're not in the position that they were in at this point. And then the last thing to talk about here before we do get into the things we didn't see is that, of course, we were informed about the AI instigator being a thing, but here we get to find out what it actually is. And look, anytime I hear about an America's vote at the midpoint of the season that's going to impact the game, I immediately just think it's going to be the worst thing ever, and that it's going to be something that drastically ends up ruining the momentum of the season. I was fully prepared for that, but thankfully, I don't think this is going to be that bad. This essentially is just like a different type of version of the Saboteur. Basically, whoever ends up being the instigator is going to try to spread a bunch of misinformation about the house guests to using their AI avatar, and then apparently if they did a good enough job, they're going to earn some kind of prize, and then however well that we think they did will determine how much they end up receiving. I have two things to say about this. One, I think it's pretty obvious that Tucker's going to get this, and I think he's kind of the perfect candidate for it, so he's going to win, and I think that it honestly is like the perfect person to get this, because I think the amount of chaos that he could cause through this could be really exciting to watch. Two, I think this is just honestly something that they pulled out of their ass last minute because they wanted to find a way to preserve these AI avatars, and this was their only way of doing so, and it's not a bad way to do that. I think that they're always needed to, like, you're not going to create all these avatars and then not do anything with them. I think this is like the perfect way to utilize it, and it also isn't really something that could impact the game all that much, and if it does, it's going to be really fun to watch. There's a lot that you can do with this. There's a lot of chaos that Tucker can create here. Like I said, I'm operating under the assumption that he's going to have this because I feel like it's pretty obvious that he's the fan favorite. People are going to be inclined to vote for him. I think he's probably going to end up winning this. But we will have to see. Either way, I think this is a really fun idea. I'm all here for this twist, and I think in a season that is just firing on all cylinders at this point, I think dropping in not super overly challenging twists like this and just having it maybe affect the game in a fun, entertaining way, I think this is honestly the way to go, and I think it's a net positive either way you look at it. So honestly, no complaints on my end. Right, so now I'm going to talk about the things that we didn't see, and there's really only one thing to discuss here, because like I said, this episode did a really good job of just kind of covering everything and giving us more of a sense of, you know, where everyone's at, how this flip ended up taking place. I think they did a really good job when it came to that, so I don't really have a lot to discuss in terms of things they didn't show. The only thing that we didn't see that I think is maybe of some importance is that Brooklyn was trying to initiate this sort of truce between Tucker and Quinn, trying to get them to make up in some way, but it didn't really seem to work out between the two of them. They didn't really seem too jazzed about it, not really seeming like they wanted to resolve anything, so doesn't seem like that's going to go anywhere, but I'm only talking about because I think it might play a role in this week. If Tucker wins HOH in particular, I think that could be really fun to see how that ends up going down. Is he willing to make amends with Quinn, or is he just going to discard him immediately like he has with anyone that he, you know, ends up running him throughout the season? We'll have to see how that plays out, but either way, I thought it was a fun moment. Not a ton to talk about, but I thought overall it was still worth noting. So, oh my god, I mean, where do we even begin when it comes to things to talk about here? I mean, look, when you have such a game-changing moment like this, where the whole game is pretty much blown open at this point, the collective is very much over, the Pentagon is not nearly in as good of a position as they were after this, and now T-Core and Kimo have finally taking control and taking the reins of the game in the way that I knew they were capable of doing. There's just so much up in the air for how this week could really play out moving forward. I mean, if you want my honest opinion, I worry for Brooklyn. I really worry for Brooklyn, because Brooklyn already, I think, was doing stuff that people were starting to take note of, ratting out alliances, feeling pretty safe throughout, you know, all the protection that she was in, trying to dictate to people how they needed to vote and telling them that they couldn't really vote any other way. That I think it was only a matter of time before her her great positioning was challenged, but I didn't think it would be this quick. And I honestly think it is so bad to the point where I could see a scenario where Brooklyn ends up leaving next week. We'll have to see what ends up happening, but I think that's definitely a possibility. On the flip side of things, if like a Chelsie or a Cam or Brooklyn win, I really fear for T-Core and Kimo, because they are probably going to be the people that they are the most pissed at. I mean, Joseph too, I definitely worry about, but Joseph is already kind of like playing the middle, so I feel like he's going to be okay for the most part. He also doesn't have like that great a read, so he's not nearly as much of a threat in that way, but he could very well become one, because I think he is developing a pretty strong social capital in the game that I think could definitely take him far. So we'll have to see how that really does end up going. Once again, I think, the three people I am the most curious about for really where they stand in the game is one, MJ. Now that she has survived this vote that a lot of people thought she survived this week, where a lot of people thought she was going to end up leaving, and many of them were playing, with the pretense that she was the target this week, and so they didn't really try to strategize with her all that much. Where is she really going to end up falling at this point? We know that she had a close connection with Chelsie at one point, but that's kind of fallen through. Is she going to go more towards the T-Core and Kimo side, or is she now going to go towards, or is she going to go back over there? I'm excited to see how that plays out. Leah also is a huge question mark. She's not really in anything, but I do think that her making this move now is going to have it so it's going to make it so now she kind of has to make a choice, and I hope she's able to do that, because I like when Leah is talking strategically. I like what I see from her when it comes to that side of things. I think she has that strategic acumen within her. I think she just needs to utilize it, and I'm hoping we get to see more of that and less of her talking about who she wants to showmance with, because that just is not at all going to benefit her in the long run. I think if we see more of this Leah, I think she honestly could end up going a lot farther and honestly do a lot better than I've even been giving her credit for. So I hope we're able to see that. Quinn, though, is easily the biggest question mark for me right now. I have no idea how things are going to go, because on one hand, I can see him absolutely getting targeted next week. I mean, he just had, I think, easily the most disastrous HOH out of anybody this season. None of his targets ended up going home. Everyone that he needed to not win a comp ended up winning, and his alliance that he felt okay with has completely blown up at this point, and now all he has pretty much is the Visionaries. Now, the good thing is that, very similar to like Cedric and Chelsie week one, he didn't vote and he didn't participate in the chaos, but how is he going to recover from all this? Is he going to be able to recover from this? I really don't know. I think it's very easy to take a shot at Quinn next week, because he had this terrible HOH and things didn't go his way, and we have no idea where he's going to go at this point. I think it's very easy to target him, and I could honestly very much see him going next week, but we will have to see how that plays out. Tucker and Angela, I mean, I would love to see a Tucker win, but also Angela can play in the HOH, and if Angela actually gets power again, I really want to see what she's going to do, because she came into this week wanting to have like a much cleaner HOH, wanting to have a much clearer path of what she was going to do. Now, do I believe that she's going to do that? No, this is Angela we're talking about, but if she manages to end up, gaining power and have a fairly, normal HOH that doesn't end up going in flames, I honestly do think Angela could end up going a lot farther in this game than we've been expecting, and I'm very much here for it, because just an Angela that is able to stay out of all of the drama and kind of end up in this positioning where people want to include her in things would be such a funny irony, considering that she was the one that really initiated all of the drama, not with this particular situation, but most situations in the house she gets herself involved in. An Angela that's not involved in the drama is an Angela I really want to see, especially one that is way more confident and feels like she's in a better position. I really do want to see that side from her. I don't know if we're going to, but I mean, she's doing things in the house that I've never seen anybody do, and I just need to see her stick around as a result. So I'm really not sure how that's going to play out moving forward, but I think that's going to be really interesting to see. And then with Tucker, I mean, honestly, I think Tucker has kind of found new life in this game. Yes, obviously, in the beginning of the week, everyone was targeting him and Angela, but I think coming out of it, I mean, there's so much more chaos going on around him that I honestly think he's going to be able to slide by. Probably still going to win a lot of comps and do some really unpredictable shit. But I think it's only going to benefit someone like Tucker, who isn't really someone that is like the most reliable ally, that he can now just kind of, you know, he can kind of just like weasel his way into anything. And I honestly think that he's going to be here for a while as a result, because everyone's going to want Tucker as a number now that this whole thing has happened and, you know, the line has been drawn in the sand. I think this is a great time for Tucker to honestly really solidify himself in a really good position. And I don't think he's going to be targeted next week. Now, he still could be, obviously. They still could target Tucker. But I just think after all that happened, especially in this episode, I just don't see it being a likely possibility at this point. I think there's so much more that's up in the air. I honestly think Tucker is going to be fine, at least for a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think overall, everything, when you have a moment like this, that is just completely like, you've drawn the line in the sands, and now the game is just wide open at this point. It really is anyone's guess for how things are going to play out. But if it is anything on the level of what we've gotten these 2 weeks, holy shit, are we in for a great season? And I honestly think it might be, because we have the wall comp tonight, and I think if there was any time to do an endurance comp, it is absolutely this week. I am so excited to see how this plays out, especially knowing that everybody can compete. I have no idea what the outcome is going to be here, and I'm actually filming this when they haven't played the comp yet, so I can actually speculate as to what's going to happen and who's going to target who, because that's something I have not been able to do in my other videos, because I'm filming them way later when, you know, nominations have already been made and things like that, and I can't speculate on those things. I actually can speculate on those things in this video, and that does really excite me. And all around, I mean, I'm just really just hyped to see how the rest of this season is going to go. It's not normal for a Big Brother season to get better as it goes along, and the fact that, like, the twists are working and the comps are equitable and we have all these crazy moves happening and there's so much uncertainty within the house. There's still no real solid alliance of any kind, especially now. I mean, every alliance is pretty much shattered at this point. It is just such a anomaly of a season, and I keep waiting for it to go south, but I don't know if it's going to. I really don't at this point. I'm really just hopeful of the fact that we're not going to get a zombie week this time around. We're not going to get Jag playing the HOH twice and sucking all the momentum out of the season. We're not going to get things like that this time around, and this could actually be a really entertaining season throughout. And if these 4 weeks are any indication, I really do feel like this is shaping up to be the best season of Big Brother we have had in a very long time. But either way, I am just so ecstatic with the way everything ended up playing out. And again, I've said before, when Big Brother is at its best, it is generally some of the best TV you will watch. Like, generally. What we got in this episode in particular, I think we're going to be talking about for years to come, and I'm just so excited I'm just so happy to see the way everything went down and how, how it's all going to end up going from here. I think it's going to be so exciting, and I'm hoping it's not one of those instances where a lot of the times in Big Brother we have these, like, flips of sorts and the game really does die down. I'm hoping that's not the case, and I don't think it's going to be the case. There is so much potential for so many different rivalries. There's so much potential for all this new drama that can open up with the AI instigator in play as well. I really do think we are shaping up for this to be just a really phenomenal season of this show, and I really hope that ends up being the case. But either way, guys, in my review of this week of Big Brother, I know that this was definitely a long video, but there really was a lot to talk about, specifically Thursday's episode. There was just so much that went down, and I'm just when Big Brother is at its best, you're going to hear me gush about a lot because it's a rarity. It really is a rarity for me to be generally excited about a Big Brother week, let alone episodes. And honestly, both have just been delivering so much this year, and I just hope that continues to be the case. But either way, guys, over this video, hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see. Let me know what you guys thought this week overall. Where do you think things are going to go? Also, who do you want to see win the wall comp? Me personally, I want to see a Kimo win. I really want to see that happen. I know everybody really wants Tucker, but I want to see Kimo or T-Core win this after making this crazy power move. If they somehow end up in power, this week is going to be really spicy to watch. But either way, guys, for this video, hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.